And we are now ready to start with the second session, which focuses on cybersecurity for safety, of course. And the first speaker is Pete Cooper.
Thank you. Just looking for the clicker. Always start with an IT faff. So good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the team for the invitation. My name is Pete Cooper. I've been around cybersecurity for a while. I'm in industry, in the venture capital industry at the moment, so I'm helping companies and cybersecurity companies on their cybersecurity journey. But I think the one that's quite relevant to this is that I formerly led the cybersecurity transformation of the UK government. So think sector scale for the UK government. So I've got a slightly different background when it comes to cybersecurity. I used to fly around in those. It was the first part of my career. And then I sort of worked in and around government and industry. But I've done various things, all relating to large-scale change and cybersecurity, ranging from doing a lot of work with the aviation sector and companies such as Boeing and ICAO, so the UN body for aviation, to working with the hacker community on how to improve thinking and collaboration and build bridges between the hacker community, the research community, and industry. So I've got a varied perspective when it comes to large-scale change and cybersecurity. For the topic that we're talking about today, and it's a great topic, when we're talking about transportation as a target when it comes to cybersecurity, I mean, these are all pretty recent headlines. So you look at the conversations that Boeing have had post the Lockbit ransomware attack, which is still ongoing for the ramifications, and the data from that attack has just been published. The recent warnings from the US government and US agencies about the fact that there are now nation-state actors that are placing malware directly in critical infrastructure, including, we suspect, transportation, to be ready for and used at a time and place of their choosing. And at the same time, you've got things such as the ransomware attacks that happened with the Raven Air Group, who were forced to ground flights, which is a ransomware attack that took out a lot of their maintenance software. And without that maintenance software, they then couldn't access the data about the aircraft. Therefore, the aircraft couldn't fly. They had to ground everything. And then the more recent one, which was literally last week, which was 4 major Australian shipping ports ground to a halt after a cyber attack, which is then having national ramifications, such as pushing up the prices of basically Christmas and price hike fears. And then the more recent one, the other recent one, directly related to the rail network, was the cyber attack against the Polish rail network. So transportation is a target. I think we can all agree on that. Now at the moment, I mean, so I did a postgrad on cybersecurity a while ago, and I was interviewing people about what they saw as the perspectives of the industry, and this statement stood out pretty well for me, which is the perspective of the adversaries is that there is nothing really stopping them in them actually trying to achieve what it is they're trying to achieve. No adversary is really looking at an organization and saying, well, I won't bother because it's going to be too hard. That's the problem we have at the moment, because at the moment they're looking at the defenders and pretty much thinking they can crack on. So we talk about cybersecurity frameworks. This is the standard framework that we all know and love. But is it really, for a lot of organizations, is this the framework that we're using? Which framework is it that we're using as boards? So from a cybersecurity leadership, from a leadership of the organization, we need to be on the left-hand side, not on the right-hand side of that. Does anybody recognize what that photo is? I'll buy you a beer if you do. Okay, my wallet is safe. So that is a photo of something called the Cuyahoga River in America. It was one of the most polluted rivers in America. It was so polluted with so much oil on it, it used to regularly catch fire. It was literally the river that caught fire. And from 1868 is the first time it caught fire. It caught fire 13 times. The biggest fire that it had in 1952 caused $1 million worth of damage, which back in 1952 is a lot of money. Nothing really happened. It used to regularly catch fire. People got used to the river catching fire. Just think about that in your head of things got so bad from a pollution perspective, people just got used to the river catching fire. And it was only when the mayor of the local town invited the press to come and look at one of the fires that actually the press then put that photo on the front of Time magazine. So that photo is from the fire in 52, I think, which was the really expensive one. But it wasn't actually the fire that the press came to see. So they managed to take a picture, create so much fury and excitement and upset that out of that news story came the US Environmental Protection Agency. And then that's when all the environmental protections came in. So it was the press, it was the public outcry, it was the we have to do something about this, but it reached a critical mass because of scrutiny, because of sort of adverse publicity. That's the thing that changed it. So when we start looking at the cybersecurity industry, how many fires are we having before it's now causing us to drive change? How many fires do we need before we start driving change? And the way that we look at this is, are we really thinking strategically? And there's a lot of conversation today about sort of digitization and digitization at scale. Are we thinking about the cybersecurity aspects of that? And is it strategic thinking, or are we literally looking at the technology? When I speak to a lot of organizations about cybersecurity, it's we are running to digitize all of the things, but we're sort of looking at our feet for a lot of this. We're not really looking to the horizon, looking to where we actually align our objectives, looking to how we actually pull the organizations together. And our innovation and connectivity is pretty much outstripping our ability to protect and secure. To paraphrase a good sort of friend in the US who also sort of works on this, but he's worked in the health sector and health industry for a lot of this. His mantra is, don't connect it if you can't protect it. So you've got to be absolutely sure you can protect it before you connect it. And just another couple of sort of quotes that came out of some of the conversations that I've had is going on to that perspective of how many fires do we need to have. It's the perspective of, well, as long as it doesn't happen to us, that's fine. But we have to think about this from a sectoral perspective, is that you stand or fall together as a sector, not as an organization. And that's the way that you have to start thinking. It's the same conversation you have at a national level or a regional level, is that you stand or fall together. So it's not good enough to start saying, well, if the organizations around this sector start falling over, then we'll start caring about it. If there's a fire over there, we'll start caring about it. Because as we've already seen and discussed today, the fires are coming, whether we like it or not. And then one of the other things is that when a lot of organizations are sort of not very mature in their cybersecurity journey, the conversation will be, well, we are secure, but we just won't tell you how we're secure. It's like, and again, you've got to be able to say what you're doing, show people how you're doing it, because then that increases trust and confidence. And this is all about trust and confidence, especially in a safety critical sector. A lot of work in the aviation sector where it's, well, we're not going to show how we protect the aircraft. It's like, well, you've got to be able to demonstrate, because you can't just say to people, trust us. You've got to be able to allow them to see why they should trust you, and you've got to make that a resilient trust. And we always talk about digitization, and digitization will save us. That will make a massive difference for the sector. But don't forget is that there are strengths and weaknesses of legacy IT. For a lot of really legacy systems, they're not accessible to an adversary. For a lot of the legacy systems around many of the different sectors, and sort of pretty much as well from the railway perspective, if you wanted to disrupt the system, you'd actually have to go to the signaling box physically to disrupt it. Once we digitize all of the things, you'll be able to disrupt it from the other side of the world if you wanted to. So there is a double-edged sword to digitization of legacy IT, because as soon as you digitize it, you make it accessible. As soon as you digitize it, you have to start thinking about how you're going to patch it and look after it. Is it fragile from a point of view of the technology? And more importantly, is it managed? And who do you know is managing it? And I mean, God bless XKCD, but it's amazing how many organizations just don't quite realize that a lot of the software they rely on, some of it is actually managed by a small team doing it voluntarily in America or a different country where they've just got a hobby of maintaining a piece of software. And if that software falls over, such as Log4j, which is the vulnerability that happened a few years ago, then all of a sudden we've now got global ramifications. So this digitize all of the things mindset massively increases your attack surface. And it also makes it really hard to consider your supply chain as well. I mean, borrowing from the medical sector, this sort of diagram shows that you might have lots and lots of different bits of software or software packages that make up the products and the services that you use. But you've only got to have one piece of software which is insecure, has vulnerabilities, and you can see how it gets packaged up till eventually it ends up in hospitals. It's exactly the same in the aviation sector. It'll be exactly the same in the railway sector. So the supply chain of both hardware and software is a critical challenge that all sectors are now starting to juggle, because you have to manage the vulnerabilities across all of that. And vulnerability management, really good, mature vulnerability management that is proactive, takes a lot of thinking about, and it takes a lot of leadership. Because this is a massive crossover between cyber and safety. You are a safety critical sector. And a lot of the progress that you've made over the years, again like aviation, are based on learning all of those really good safety lessons. And it's that Swiss cheese model of trying to stop and trying to have layers to stop bad things happening, because you have got those breakpoints, and they're either human, their technology, or their process. And we have backups, we have fail-safes. But the thing to always remember is that a lot of those backups and fail-safes will not be operating at the capacity. So if you're operating at 100% with all of your fantastic digitized systems, then your backups or fail-safes will have you running at 50%, for example. So again, operationally thinking about what this looks like in the future, because you think about all of the attacks that have happened, such as, go as far back as, for example, the Sony attack. They woke up one morning, all of their stuff had gone, and they were basically breaking out BlackBerries that were in the basement and picking up pens and paper. So that's what a bad day looks like. So the capacity attacks are challenging. But I'd also flag to you that there will be an attack evolution as people get more and more interested in the sector. So think really about the first generation of attacks, which is attacks that will disrupt your availability or your confidentiality. So I can't access my system's been disrupted, or I've lost my data. Okay, we have backups for that safety critical sector. We can work our way around that. The second generation of attacks that you really have to start thinking about are the attacks where the adversary really understands your systems. And your adversary has sat down and really thought, if I'm going to cause this organization to have a bad day, what's the worst bad day I can give them? When that adversary understands how your safety protocols work, when that adversary understands how to disrupt those safety protocols without the human operators spotting that the safety protocols have been disrupted, that's going to be the worst day. And there are adversaries out there that will spend a lot of time, money, and effort to understand those systems better than some of the operators. And we've seen that in other sectors as well, where you see an adversary work out what chain they have to do to try and link together in order to have the maximum pain point on that organization from a disruption perspective. So think about the attacks that you're facing now, and think about the attacks you could be facing in the future. So a lot of this really will be securing the human decision making inside your systems. It's humans that operate the systems ultimately. They are the ones that will make the safe decisions to run safe operations. How do you protect their decision making so they can always see, spot, and stop the attacks that are going on? Because you have to, at all stages, allow them to be able to deal with failure. And that failure, not just being from a bolt has broken or a system has broken down, but from an adversary that is trying to actually create failure. So really for this, you need a long-term strategy and vision. For the UK government, when I did this for the UK government, this was the UK government cybersecurity strategy. So this was the first ever strategy the UK government had to protect the sector itself. So the vision was very much linked to overarching national aims. The aim is the thing that I would try and pick out to you, which is it's across the whole of the public sector, but the final bit of the sentence, which is resilient to known vulnerabilities and attack methods. Because it's really hard to say to your team, we're going to protect ourselves against attacks we don't know about. 0 days. 0 days. I read it in Wired. You've got to be able to say to your team, here is the objective. If we can be resilient and protect ourselves against known vulnerabilities and known attack methods, and our processes and our people and our systems allow us to quickly patch, fix, tell everybody what's going on and be prepared against those, that gets you 95% of the way there. The other 5% will come from all of those amazing processes and teams that you've built up, so that when you do get 0 days thrown at you, when you do get things thrown at you that you've never seen before, your team and your process and your people and your leadership and your management will get you through the rest of the 5%. Everybody has a bad day. But when that bad day happens, the team you start with that day is the team you had yesterday. So unless they're ready for it, then you're going to have a really challenging time. So really, collaboration, drivers for change going forwards, the partnership, and I can't stress this enough, the partnership between the digital community, the community which will be digitization that you're talking about this morning, the partnership between them and the cyber community has to be fully woven together. It cannot be two separate streams. It has to be together. So when the digital team are talking about we're going to digitize this, the cyber team are sitting alongside saying, and this is how we do it securely. This is how we do it resiliently. Here is how we design that thing so that securing it is easy. It cannot be we talk about sort of secure by design, but it's got to be woven into collaboration and partnership by design from the very get-go. The other thing to tag in is that cyber at a sector scale cannot be a competitive sport. So you have to, as organizations, be working together so that if you see something that might be relevant to other organizations within your sector, tell them. Because again, you stand or fall together. The way that we pushed this on the government side was that we came up with a tagline of Defend as One. Defend as one organization, because there were so many different stovepipes and different parallel bits of work going on, we had to weave everybody together. And the best way to think about that is defend as one. It works within an organization, it works across a sector, it works nationally as well. There is a role there for regulators and governments to help support, and there's lots of really good, fantastic regulations and partnerships coming out. But again, the thing just to stress is, when you are even in the centre of government or the centre of a regulator, it can be easy to try and impose and say, this is what you need to do on cybersecurity. And there is always inertia to try and break through to get organizations to do the right thing. The key thing in all of this is making the right thing the easy thing to do. So if you have a build it and they will come mentality, things move much, much quicker. There are other things, sort of how do you share information quickly? There are ISACs, for example, that you can set up to help share information and get ahead of the threat as it's moving. And there is lots to be learned from other sectors. Having listened to a lot of the presentations this morning, the journey that you were on as a railway sector is very, very similar to the journey that the aviation industry have had for the last 10, 15 years. One example of that. So I got involved with a lot of work in and around the hacker community, talking with the hackers around, or working with the hackers on various different topics. And in fact, before I start actually, if I said the word hacker to you, how many people would think about that as an adversary? If you say the word hacker or read the word hacker, do you think bad person? Yeah? Okay, so if I said driver, as in a car driver, do you normally think bad driver the second you say driver? Okay, so when I say hackers, all right, some of my best friends are hackers, and they're amazing, and they help organizations all over the world. So when you hear the word hacker, don't think bad, is my first thing. If you read the government cybersecurity strategy, I didn't mention the word hacker once. I always said adversaries. It's adversaries attacking you on your digital networks. That's it. So a hacker is not necessarily a bad person. Much like you wouldn't say drivers mean all bad drivers. Bad drivers are just bad drivers. Yeah, but it doesn't, all drivers are not bad. So just sort of have that in the back of your mind. So hackers are awesome. Hackers and researchers are actually some of the best people to move your organization quickly into understanding what your issues are. But unfortunately, industry can sometimes, quite often, see hackers as bad. And that wasn't really helping anybody. Conversation I had with a hacker friend when we started talking about vulnerabilities in the aviation sector, and he was like, okay, I'm up for it and I'll be open because the risk is on them to talk about it. And he said, I know of 3 major vulnerabilities in 3 major US transportation facilities. Who do I tell? So he knew, but he didn't know who to tell, and he was a bit nervous about telling them. So it's like, okay, we need to link you up and we need to get you talking. So I founded something called the Aerospace Village at DEF CON, which is basically pulling together the hacker community, the research community, industry and government to spark the conversation, to spark building bridges and to collaborate together. It's been going for 5 years now. We've done lots of things like this year. Just to give you an example of how well it's gone, the US Air Force launched a satellite, and we did the world's first ever satellite hacking competition with hackers playing on an in-orbit satellite to try and spark the idea that actually collaborating and working on this is much, much better. The mission and goal is there. They'll be on the slide deck so you can go through this, but it's about building, inspiring and promoting. But it also helps you find that community in the future and that workforce in the future and that insight in the future that will actually make you more secure as an organization. In the middle of all of this, don't ever forget that when you have your bad day as an organization, you have to be ready for it. So how you respond is really critical. Exercising is really critical. The larger scale that you can exercise, the better. Lessons learnt are absolutely critical all the way through, but also be really careful of burnout. When you think about an incident might happen on sort of day 1. That incident could keep going for a year by the time you recover from it. So your team are liable to get tired over time. And the capacity and skills you start with day 1 are the capacity and skills you had yesterday. So just to wrap up, transportation is already a target. We've already seen that globally. So you have to design and think accordingly. The strategy, vision and enablers are all there, but there is a massive overlap between safety and security, and that is a good thing, and you can exploit that as an industry. Don't get too excited about trying to stop 0 days. Just get rid of the vulnerabilities you've got and the known, and that will get you 95% of the way there. The diversity and empowerment of your teams and the leadership from the board down is absolutely critical to this, and it will allow you to do that Defend as One perspective and plan for and exercise that bad day. And there are lots of lessons that you can take from across lots of different sectors. Thank you very much.